Imagine this. It's 8:48 pm. You have just spent 2 days straight, barely sleeping, coding an app from scratch. Your fingers ache, your mind is fried, and the countdown clock is nearing zero. You hit launch, and within hours, your bank account dings. $75, then $130, then more. At first, it's just a few cells, but this small idea, born from a random thought before bed, spirals into a business worth tens of thousands of dollars. Now imagine doing it again, except this time, you build a startup in just 1 week and sell it for $200,000. That's exactly what Nico did, twice. This is a story of obsession, insane deadlines, marketing hacks, and a fight against burnout. It's about how one guy with almost no coding experience hacked the startup game, made 6 figures, and then walked away. And if you think it's impossible to build and sell a startup in just days, this story will change your mind. Nico had just learned to code 3 months earlier. He wasn't some Silicon Valley tech genius, just a guy desperate for his first win. His previous projects, failures, his savings running out. And if he didn't figure something out fast, he would have to get a job. That's when he had an idea. A simple, almost ridiculous idea. One that would make him $65,000 in just 3 months. And it all started with a logo. Great businesses start with great ideas, but sometimes great ideas start completely by accident. For Nico, it all began with a logo. Back in late 2022, he was working on a different startup, Open for Ads, a marketplace to connect advertisers with content creators. The platform was almost ready, but he needed a logo before launching. And here's the problem, he was broke. Hiring a designer, too expensive. So like an scrappy entrepreneur, he decided to try something new. Around this time, AI-generated images were exploding. People were talking about tools that could create art, text and logos from just a few words. So Nico thought, why not use AI to make my logo? He got a decent design, slapped it onto his project and moved on. End of story, right? Not even close. It was late one night when the thought hit him. Wait a second. If AI can make a logo for me, what if I built an app that lets people generate logos on demand? It was simple, too simple, right? But simple ideas can be dangerous, because if he could build this, someone else could too. And that meant he had to be first. He gave himself a 48-hour deadline, not a week, not a month, 2 days. But why? Because he knew the biggest mistake founders make, wasting months building something nobody wants. So he made a deal with himself. If he couldn't build a working prototype in 48 hours, he would drop the idea and move on. No overthinking, no wasted time, just execution. And to make sure he didn't back out, he did something bold. He posted on Twitter, launching an AI logo generator in 48 hours. Let's go. Now the whole world, or at least his 500 Twitter followers, was watching. There was no turning back. The clock was ticking. He needed to build an app that could take a text description from a user, send it to an AI model, generate a logo. But the problem? Nico had only been coding for 3 months. He wasn't an AI engineer, and he wasn't about to reinvent the wheel. So he did what any smart entrepreneur would do. He borrowed existing AI models and used something called an API. Instead of coding his own AI, he would simply send a request to an existing AI service and it would return a logo. By 11 am the next morning, he had the first prototype running. It was ugly, it was basic, but it worked. The hard part was over, or so he thought. The prototype worked, but there was still one huge problem. Users had no way to actually use it. He needed to build a website interface where people could enter their text, hit a button and get their logo. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. By 10:40 pm, after grinding all day, even through an earthquake, he still wasn't done. And worse, he was running out of time. With only 12 hours left, he had to make a choice. Delay the launch and break his promise, or find a shortcut. And then it hit him. He remembered seeing another AI startup skip coding an interface altogether by using a no-code tool called Typeform, a service that collects user input and payments. What if he did the same? Instead of wasting hours coding, he could set a Typeform to collect logo requests, manually generate logos behind the scenes, email them to customers. No automation, no fancy tech, just a duct tape solution that worked. It wasn't ideal, but it was good enough to launch. With minutes to spare, Nico threw together the final pieces. He set up pricing using a decoy strategy, offering 3 pricing tiers to make one option seem like the best deal. He crafted the landing page like a salesman, focusing on clear, persuasive copy. And finally, he gave the project a name, Make Logo AI. At 8:48 p.m., exactly 48 hours after his initial tweet, the app went live. And now, the real test began. Would anyone actually buy it? Nico had done it. With just 48 hours, barely any sleep and a last-minute workaround, Make Logo AI was live. But launching was only half the battle, because in the world of startups, it doesn't matter how good your product is. If no one knows about it, it's worthless. And Nico had a problem. He had no audience, no massive email list, no giant marketing budget, just 500 Twitter followers, which in internet terms is basically nothing. So how do you take a brand new startup with zero reputation and make people care? You make it a story. Remember that tweet Nico made, declaring he would build an AI startup in 48 hours. Turns out, people love challenges. Think about it. Running a marathon with no training, spending a month living on just $1 a day, building a business in 48 hours. People root for underdogs. And when they see someone take on an impossible challenge, they don't just watch, they share it. So when Nico posted his final tweet, 48 hours later, the app is live. Something happened. The tweet started getting likes, retweets and comments. Strangers, people who had never heard of Nico before, were now invested in the story. They wanted to see if this crazy 48-hour project would actually work. And when people are curious, they click. Within a few hours, the app had made $75 in sales. Within 48 hours, it had hit $130. Now $130 might not sound like much, but here's why it was huge. It proved one thing: people were willing to pay for it. And that's all a startup needs at the beginning. Proof that money will come in. But Nico wasn't done yet. He knew that small wins don't last. The AI space was moving fast, and it was only a matter of time before someone else launched a similar product. If he wanted to turn Make Logo AI into something bigger, he had to move quickly. And that's when he remembered Product Hunt. Product Hunt is like the front page of the internet for new tech startups. Every day, startups compete for upvotes and the top 3 products get featured in the daily newsletter, sent to millions of people. Winning product of the day means massive free traffic, exposure to investors and journalists, potential for thousands in instant revenue. In short, it's a goldmine for startup founders. But there was a catch. Product Hunt is extremely competitive. Even breaking into the top 3 is insanely difficult. And Nico? He was up against startups with big teams, funding and thousands of followers. But he had one massive advantage. When you launch something completely new, people pay attention. The first iPhone, game-changing. The first Tesla, revolutionary. The first AI-generated art tools, mind-blowing. But after a while, people get bored. New tech only has one chance to be exciting. And Nico knew that if someone else launched a logo-making AI first, he would lose the first mover advantage. So he made a bold decision. He would launch Make Logo AI on Product Hunt in just 48 more hours. No delays, no excuses. Even though the product wasn't fully automated yet, even though he was still manually generating logos, he had to be first. So he went back into monk modes. For 2 days straight, he worked on fixing bugs, polishing the website, making the landing page irresistible. And then at 3 p.m. Bali time, the launch went live. and within hours, something incredible happened. Product hunt is brutal. Most startups launch there and disappear. But Nico's story, it blew up. Make Logo AI didn't just break into the top 3, it completely destroyed the competition. The upvotes poured in, the traffic surged, and when the dust settled, Nico's tiny 48-hour project had just made over $1,000 in sales. And thanks to the product hunt exposure, even tech journalists started writing about it. The launch was an undeniable success. But here's the thing about success, it comes at a cost. Because now, Nico had a new problem. The app was making money, customers were rolling in, but everything was still manual. And if he didn't find a way to automate it fast, the entire business would collapse under its own weight. Success is a double-edged sword. When Nico first launched Make Logo AI, he had one goal, to see if people would actually pay for it. And now, he had his answer. Sales were rolling in, the app was getting attention, but there was a huge problem. Everything was still manual. Every time someone placed an order, Nico had to manually enter their request into the AI, download the logo, email it to the customer. That was fine when he had 1 or 2 customers a day. But now, the orders were stacking up. And if he didn't find a way to automate the process fast, the entire business would break down. Scaling a startup isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. And Nico knew that if he wanted to keep growing, he had to build a real user interface so customers could generate logos themselves, automate everything so he wouldn't be manually handling requests forever. So he logged himself in, went back into green mode and got to work. Within 48 more hours, he had a basic user interface up and running. Now customers could enter their text, click a button, instantly receive a logo. No more manual work, no more bottlenecks. The app was now fully automated. And as soon as he launched the update, sales exploded. Some days, the app was pulling in $100 to $500 per day. But then, something unexpected happened. When things go up fast, they can crash just as quickly. At first, everything was great. The app was making consistent sales and Nico was growing his business. But then the problems started. Unhappy customers. Some people wanted more customization and higher quality logos. Refund request. Every few days, someone would ask for a refund, chipping away at profits. Burnout. After 6 months of working non-stop, Nico was running on fumes. And then came the breaking point. On February 4th, 2023, Nico got severe food poisoning. It started as a normal stomach ache, then it got worse. Within days, he was in the hospital, lying there, exhausted and sick. He had a realization. He was burned out. He had spent half a year grinding non-stop, and even though the app was successful, it was starting to feel like a trap. Something had to change. That's when he made a bold decision. What do you do when you are stuck in a business you don't want to run anymore? You sell it. And that's exactly what Nico planned to do. He listed Make Logo AI on a startup marketplace called acquire.com, a platform where people buy and sell small businesses. His asking price $49,000. How did he come up with that number? It's simple. A common way to price startups is to take the last 12 months of revenue and multiply it by 2 to 5, depending on the business growth potential. Since Nico had made around $25,000 in profits, he multiplied it by 2 to make sure it was a good deal for buyers and would sell fast. And within 24 hours of listing the business, his inbox was flooded with offers. Selling a startup isn't like selling a car. It's not about who has the most money, it's about who is the right fit. Over the next few days, Nico spoke with multiple buyers. One offered $50,000 cash. Another offered $60,000 but paid over 1 year. The last buyer offered $65,000 cash on one condition. He wanted the deal done by the end of the week. For Nico, this was surreal. Just months ago, he was struggling to make ends meet. Now, he was about to walk away with $65,000 in cash. But first, he had to make sure the buyer knew the risk. He was completely honest. The AI model wasn't perfect and some customers weren't happy with the quality, but the buyer didn't care. He had a team of engineers who could improve the AI and fix the issues. For him, this was an opportunity. For Nico, it was freedom. The deal was finalized, the money hit his account, and just like that, Make Logo AI was no longer his. But if you think this is where the story ends, you are wrong. Because just 1 year later, he did it again. But this time, he built a startup in just 1 week and sold it for $200,000. Most people after selling their first startup for $65,000 would take it easy for a while. Maybe relax, travel, enjoy the win. But not Nico. Because there was one massive problem. By selling Make Logo AI, he had also sold his only source of income. The money in his bank account gave him some breathing room. But if he didn't act fast, he would be right back where he started. So after taking a short break, he went back to the square room. Find an idea, build it fast, make money. The same process that worked the first time. Except this time, he was playing for bigger stakes. A startup is only as good as its idea, and Nico needed a profitable one. But how do you even come up with an idea for a startup? Some people sit around waiting for inspiration, others spend months researching. Nico? He stumbled onto his idea by accident. One day, while typing on Google Docs, he noticed a transcription button. He clicked it. It was terrible. The transcription was inaccurate, slow, and frustrating to use. And then it hit him. Surely, I am not the only one who hates typing. What if there was an app that let people take notes just by talking? It was a simple idea, but simple ideas make millions. And there was perfect timing. A new wave of AI-powered speech-to-text models had just been released, which meant that right now was the best time to build something like this. Most startups take months to build. Nico gave himself 1 week, because here's the truth. 99% of startups fail. And if you assume your startup will fail, would you really spend 4 months building it before knowing if people would even pay? No. So Nico focused on one thing only, getting a working prototype as fast as possible. Instead of building something perfect, he built the bare minimum version. A simple website, a basic AI transcription model, a way for users to pay. That's it. No fancy design, no extra features, just the core function. And after 7 straight days of grinding, the app was ready. Now it needed a name. It was an AI-powered talk-to-text notes app, so he called it Talk Notes. Yeah, creativity wasn't his strong suit, but the name didn't matter. What mattered was, would people actually buy it? Most startups fail because they can't get customers, and Nico had one rule: never spend more money than the startup makes, which meant no paid ads until he had some revenue. So instead, he used a simple, free marketing hack: startup directories. These are websites where people discover new tech products, and the visitors are early adopters who love trying out new tools. So Nico spent 2 hours submitting talk notes everywhere he could, and within a few days, he made $700 in sales. Now, $700 might not sound like much, but it proved something crucial. People were willing to pay, and that meant it was worth scaling. A great launch doesn't mean long-term success, and Nico learned that the hard way. After the initial $700 spike, something terrible happened. The sales completely stopped. But why? Because a launch is an event. At first, you get a rush of early adopters, but if you don't have a long-term strategy, the traffic disappears. Nico needed a way to bring in new customers consistently, so he tried SEO, optimizing the website to rank higher on Google, cold outreach, sending emails to potential users, more startup directories. Each strategy helped a little, but it was slow, and the frustration started creeping in. Nobody talks about this part, the part where things aren't working, where you are trying everything but nothing is clicking. And after weeks of struggling, Nico started to feel it, burnout. He wasn't motivated, he wasn't excited. For the first time, he thought maybe this startup is a mistake, and he almost gave up. But he had one last move, a move that had already worked once before: product hunt. In the startup world, momentum is everything. If you are not growing, you are dying. And right now, TalkNotes was dying. The initial launch hype was gone. Sales had flatlined. Nico had two choices: give up and move on, find a way to make this startup work. And he wasn't ready to quit just yet, because he has one last trick up his sleeve. Nico had done this before and it worked, so he was going to do it again. Product hunt was a goldmine for exposure, and if he could get enough upvotes, TalkNotes could be seen by millions of potential customers. But there was a problem. Since his last launch, Product Hunt has changed. It was now way harder to get featured. The rules were different, the competition was tougher, but Nico didn't care. Because even if he didn't win Product of the Day, a launch would still bring free traffic, backlinks and credibility. So he set up the pace, wrote a compelling piece, and at 3 p.m. Bali time, TalkNotes went live on Product Hunt. And within hours, the upvotes started rolling in, the traffic surged, sales come back to life. By the end of the day, TalkNotes was generating $1,500 in monthly recurring revenue. Now that wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to prove that this startup had serious potential. And now that it was making consistent money, Nico could finally start running paid ads. The fastest way to grow a business: paid traffic, right? Now that TalkNotes had some cash flow, Nico reinvested every dollar back into growth, and instead of wasting money on random ads, he used a proven strategy: hyper-targeted marketing. Imagine you are selling dog food. Most people would run generic ads like best dog food for any dog, but Nico knew that specificity sells. So instead, he would create ads like attention corgi owners, the perfect food for your pup. Golden retriever owners, this dog food is made for you. Even though these ads targeted fewer people, they converted way better because they felt personal. And he applied the same strategy to TalkNotes. Instead of running generic ads, he made ads for specific groups. Are you a lawyer? It's the fastest way to take notes. For writers, turn your voice into text instantly. Students, never take notes by hand again. And just like that, sales doubled. Between the monthly subscriptions and customers paying 1 year upfront, TalkNotes was now making over $10,000 per month. Nico had done it, from 0 to 5 figures in just a few months. And for the first time, he felt like this could be a long-term business. So he allowed himself a small break. He traveled to Korea, made some friends. For the first time in months, he relaxed. But then, everything fell apart. Success is fragile. One moment, everything is going perfectly, and the next, it all comes crashing down. And that's exactly what happens to Nico. Nico was asleep, finally enjoying a break after months of grinding. And then, without warning, a bug broke the entire website. TalkNotes was completely unusable. Customers tried logging in, nothing worked. New users tried signing up, error messages everywhere. And when Nico woke up, sales had dropped 70% overnight. His inbox was flooded with complaints, 50 plus emails from angry customers, subscription cancellations rolling in, and suddenly, the business he had spent months building was falling apart. Fixing a bug sounds simple. Just tweak the code, update the site, and you are good, right? Wrong. Nico spent 7 straight hours trying to fix it, and nothing worked. Every time he thought he had it, another problem popped up. It was like playing hack-a-mole with his sanity. By the end of the day, he was mentally drained, and for the first time, he thought, I don't want to do this anymore. This is the part no one talks about. We hear about the wins. I made $10K in a month. My startup blew up overnight. But what about the downside? The stress, the burnout, the feeling of being trapped in a business you don't even want to run anymore. For weeks after the bug incident, Nico felt empty. He would sit at his laptop trying to work, but his motivation was gone. 20 minutes in, burned out. An hour later, still no progress. And the worst part? He knew that if he didn't act fast, the AI space would move on without him. In just a few months, talk notes could become irrelevant. So he had two options: hire someone to manage the business for him, or sell the startup. And hiring someone, that meant more headaches, more decisions, more stress. So the choice was clear. It was time to sell. But there was just one problem. He had to do it fast. Selling a startup should be the best moment of your life, but for Nico, it turned into a nightmare. By now, Nico knew how startup sales worked. The faster you sell, the more valuable your business is. Because if you wait too long, sales slow down, the hype fades, and buyers lose interest. So he listed talk notes on acquire.com, the same platform where he sold his last startup, but this time he aimed higher. $200,000 asking price. Why? Because unlike last time, talk notes had consistent revenue, like over $10,000 per month, a working ad strategy, a subscription model which made the business predictable. Within days, he got his first formal offer, $200,000 in cash. The deal was locked in. All he had to do was transfer the assets and the money would hit his account. But then, everything went wrong. Big deals don't happen over Venmo. To make sure both sides are protected, startup sales go through an escrow service. The buyer sends the money to a middleman, escrow.com. Once the assets are transferred, the middleman releases the funds. It's supposed to be safe, reliable. But this time, it became a total disaster. Nico was using Wise as his business bank. And after the assets were fully transferred, escrow.com suddenly decided, we don't send money to Wise accounts, which made zero sense because Nico had used Wise the last time he sold a startup, and now his $200,000 was stuck. What do you do when someone is holding your money hostage? You wait, you negotiate, you threaten legal action, but nothing worked. Escrow.com stalled for weeks. Nico's stress levels went through the roof, and worse, there was a real risk that the buyer would lose patience and walk away, which meant he could lose everything. The only options left. At this point, Nico had two choices: wait for escrow.com to fix the issue, cancel the deal and start over. But the problem was, if they cancelled, the buyer had to wait for his refund first, which meant another few weeks of delays. And if the buyer changed his mind during that time, the entire sale could collapse. But there was no other choice. The deal was cancelled. The refund took forever. But somehow, the buyer didn't back out. And this time, they decided to skip escrow altogether and handle the sale manually. It was a huge risk. But at this point, Nico just wanted to be done. So he transferred everything. And then, $200,000 hit his account. It was official. He had sold his startup again. But this time, for 3 times more than the first one. 2 startups, 2 big exits, 1 clear pattern. So what are the biggest lessons from Nico's journey? Here's what separates entrepreneurs who succeed from the ones who don't. Number 1, speed wins. The faster you launch, the less you risk. Nico built and launched both startups in under a week. Why? Because most ideas fail. And if you are going to fail, you want to fail fast. Not after wasting 6 months building something nobody wants. Number 2, simple ideas work best. AI-generated logos and voice-to-text notes aren't complicated ideas, but they solve a clear problem. Startups don't need to be revolutionary, they just need to be useful and easy for people to understand. Number 3. Marketing is greater than product. You can have the best product in the world, but if nobody sees it, it doesn't matter. Nico used viral storytelling on Twitter, launches on Product Hunt, niche targeted Facebook ads. The product was good, but the marketing was better, and that's why it worked. Number 4. Know when to quit. Most entrepreneurs stay in a business too long. They try to fix something that isn't growing, but Nico knew if a business isn't growing, sell it while it still has value. That's how he walked away with $265,000 in startup exits in just 2 years. And here's the craziest part. He is already working on his next startup, because when you understand the formula, you can do this over and over again.